they're too long. So that's my take on it.
And I completely agree, honestly, because I really do believe a lot of gun violence, which is another one of our topics that we will most likely talk about in another one of our episodes, it really stems from teens being bullied, even if it starts at a young age. I know personally, because I was definitely bullied a lot as a kid, whether it be because of my weight or just how I looked or how young I was, because I've always been the youngest of my grade. Whether it was because of those aspects, I was always being bullied. And although yes, it doesn't really affect me anymore. Yes, it affected me then, and I didn't stem into gun violence. Some teens don't have the support at home or just people in general to support them through those things and let them know that it is okay to be feeling this way and good ways to cope with it. Some kids, they just don't have that support system, and that's how they get into the life of violence. Like you look at some kids on the news or just in general who are within gun violence or within just bad acts of just illegal doings. You will see, if you look deeper into their background and or history, you can see that they have had some aspect of, I'm not going to say PTSD, but just like some type of traumatic experience to them, whether it not be like, my parents died in a car crash, but simple stuff just like getting bullied over their weight and not having a way to cope over it. They're having those traumatic events and not having a way to cope with it, causing them to just feel like, oh yes, this is my only escape, whether it be drugs, gun violence, or anything within those aspects. And I feel bullying is definitely a major cause, especially considering we really don't do anything to help actually treat it. Yes, you'll be like, oh yes, you need to spend this much time in detention, or oh, you can't go to recess, or something along those lines. There has never been an actual treatment to bullying, and I feel that is a very major cause.
That's what I'm saying, is like, who's helping us? Who's helping the students? Who's looking out for us? Yeah, there's counselors, but like, what happens when they can't make time for us, or whenever they're just not available or in because they're somewhere else? Or what if they just tell us to, well, actually, I've had this happen before. In elementary, I was bullied. Specifically, this school is great, but it caused a lot of like controversy between my friends. I had a best friend, and she would bully me on the daily for going to an all-girls school, because she called me a homo, and she just got a lot of other people to bully me, along with the fact that I'm like that for my weight as well. And there was just a lot of bullying around that, and I went to my counselor about it, because I'm very sensitive. So I went to my counselor about it, and I was like, hey, this is happening. And she's like, oh, she's just playing around, she's just kidding, I don't think she means it, she's your friend, right?
I definitely feel that's another problem. A lot of counselors, not specifically our counselors, because I do believe our counselors are some of the top tier counselors I've ever met. They're very understanding and very helpful. But counselors at other schools, sometimes students don't feel comfortable just talking to the counselors, because just having an adult in the room and talking to them about their problems may make them feel uncomfortable. But counselors wanting, like, kind of forcing them, or making the student feel, or just the child in general, making them feel like the child has to talk to the counselor, and then all their problems will be solved. That's not okay. Like, the forcefulness and or pressure that a student feels to have to talk about their problems, especially if they're not comfortable and or not ready, it's not the best, and it's really deteriorating some students' mental health. And I've seen that around school. I've had many friends talk to me, or just peers in general, talk to me how they don't feel comfortable talking to adults about their problem, and like them just saying like, oh yeah, but I feel forced or pressured to have to go talk to them, because then that'll make my problems feel better. And it's sometimes not that way. You just have to be within yourself.
Yeah, and I feel like when it comes to mental health and people who are like getting bullied, it really does affect the way that people think and have perspectives around like their peers or their schools, like teachers and things like that. If they feel like they don't have a really good support system, then they might not feel comfortable in order to open up about things and talk. And especially since the fact that not everyone has the same way of coping or like releasing their emotions. So talking may not specifically be the way that they are able to cope and get out their feelings and let out their problems. Like things like art is another way that people do, singing, dancing. There's just different ways that people really find themselves and like can help their problems other than just like specifically talking it out. And while that does help, it really comes down to the fact that they have to be comfortable enough to do those things. And so counselors at school or like being forced to go to those kinds of things doesn't really help, because it just feels like another way of being trapped instead of an escape, so to speak.
I completely agree. Everybody has their own form of coping with things. Personally, I like to just talk. I don't like any advice or feedback. I just kind of like to talk. And then I like having somebody there to listen and to just understand what I'm feeling, and just validating my feelings instead of just pushing them aside and just saying, oh, you're just a teenager, you're just going through hormones or something, or they were just kidding, you're so sensitive. But those are things that I've heard most of my life, and let me tell you, that does not go well in the end. But also painting is a really good one for me to cope with things, because it's like when I don't want to talk, it's usually how I cope.
Going back to your previous statement about how parents or just adults in general will be like, oh, you're a teenager, you're too young to feel these things. I do believe that's another one of a major problem. Children not having their feelings validated or their stress validated, because yes, at this school, I'll say at this school specifically, actually, I feel a lot more stress, not a bad type of stress, but more of a healthy stress that I didn't really feel at other schools. And while I do feel like this is good and that I'm being challenged and that I really do appreciate it, sometimes it can become too much, and I don't have a way that I know. Sometimes I just don't know how to deal with it. But a parent or another adult that you're talking to, and they'll be like, oh, you're a child and you'll know what it feels like, what real stress feels like. Keep being a child while you can. It feels like they're not letting us, like they're not understanding the fact that, like, yes, you have stress, and I completely validate that stress, and I understand that you have stress, but I also have stress, just a different form of stress. And the fact that you're not validating it, like I equally validate your stress, makes me feel bad, or like just not, I don't feel, it's like dehumanizing a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's my thing. Why are we comparing like stressors and between each other? Like, which one is worse? Like, what's the competition? What's the prize in the end? Like, whenever I go to my parents about something that I'm dealing with, they're like, oh, back in my day, blah, 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 I went through something a million times worse than that, so you should be able to handle that little thing. You're being so sensitive.
And another thing is, a lot of people are different, and just because you went through this and you made it out, congratulations. I'm very happy, and I support you, and I root for you. But other people are different, and they're not going to be able to handle the same things that you can handle, or even less than that. Like, if you're able to handle this big thing, there's no guarantee that somebody can handle something less than that. It just really depends on the person, and the fact that they're being like, oh, I handled way more, you can handle this. That's not okay. I don't believe that's okay.
Yeah, and going along with that, when it comes down to not being understood, that's what makes it harder to really go throughout school and things like that. When you don't really have that support system, and if you're not being like really encouraged by, say, your friends or your parents or your peers, then it makes you, I guess I would say, a bit more susceptible to bullying, since they don't really understand where you're coming from and how things that people say can really affect you. And it's not just little words, it's really big things that can hit you differently than others. So like, if you're more sensitive to some types of things because of something that happened in your past, well, they're not going to know that, because they're just looking at it on the front line of things, but not really getting to know what you're feeling from that.
I definitely agree. And on that note, I think we're going to have to end our show for today. I really do believe this was a great podcast. We touched on very important points, and I think the overall message of this was just like, bullying, of course we all know bullying is wrong, but we need to figure out ways how we can help step towards ending that, not just by putting up signs and not just by telling people, yes, bullying is wrong, by taking action against those who actually bully and not just making it very simple actions, not just putting them in detention. Give them actual stuff that is going to help them to progress towards, oh yes, I understand now fully that this is wrong. So, and just mental health issues in general, or just mental health validation or stress validation. I do believe we touched on some very, very important topics. I want to thank Elizabeth for coming onto the show. This was an amazing episode, and we really do appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. And can I say a little something?
Yes, go ahead.
For the people listening, just wanted to say that you're doing great and just keep pushing. It's gonna get hard, but you got this.
Thank you, and I do believe that goes for everybody out there. So once again, we want to thank you for just listening in. Once again, I'm Denise.
I'm Elizabeth.
I'm Amy.
And this was the Gemcast. Thank you.
Thank you.